Hi, I'm Emma from Balance Fulfillment, and I help HR people reduce the time that they waste on things that other people should have dealt with. So, in this video today, we're going to talk about how to stop urgent people issues taking over your week. So, how HR can reduce firefighting, shift from being a rescuer to being more of a coach, and helping to build manager capability so they stop sending all the urgent issues your way. So if you find that your week is constantly hijacked by urgent and avoidable people issues, this video could be for you. How many times do you sit down on a Wednesday morning? You've got a really clear plan, you've got a huge to-do list, you've got your own priorities, and before 10 a.m. even hits, you get a Teams message that says, "Have you got 5 minutes? It's urgent." And you think, I really didn't plan for firefighting today. Why am I always having to pick up the pieces for the issues that other people are dealing with in their own teams? There's this real sense of constant frustration, and you feel like your day has then been taken over by an urgent issue that probably could have been dealt with much earlier on to save it being urgent in the first place. By the time HR is involved, often these people issues are already urgent and complex. They're not quick, easy fixes. They're not just a fast conversation to help resolve a matter quickly and easily. They've started a long time ago with something very small, often, or something relatively easy to resolve, but they haven't been resolved. And so it's escalated to a point where now HR's been brought in, and every issue you then deal with as an HR person is urgent and complex and difficult to resolve. So in this video today, I'm going to break down why this keeps happening and share 3 practical things that HR business partners and other people working in HR can do immediately to reduce the number of urgent calls that land on your desk. So we're going to have a look at building filters and scripts. We're going to look at redefining what urgent actually means and how can you push back on things that are very important but not necessarily need your time really urgently. And we're also going to be looking at how to coach instead of catching and taking responsibility for. So urgent people issues are not the result of just bad luck. They are the end result of small things not being dealt with well or early enough. Most urgent HR calls start as maybe a low level conflict, some level of kind of disagreement within a team, personality clashes, maybe a sense of unfairness or a sense of not having a voice somewhere else in the organisation. Poor performance and underperformance that hasn't been maybe addressed early enough, and issues around sort of attitude and things like that. But often they've started really small elsewhere and they've just grown and grown and grown and grown until suddenly it's like, oh, I think we need HR to deal with this. And there's this real sort of avoidance cycle that we see, which means that an avoided conversation is somewhere in the organisation. Someone hasn't had the conversation that they might have done. We find that people managers delay, they don't do anything, or they handle it badly because they haven't got the skills, uh, the experience, the confidence to manage it well initially. So they just sort of go, I just won't do anything and hope that it all goes away. And if it doesn't, I'll just get HR to come in and fix it. And the result is that that silence and inaction really escalates the situation until it forces some level of HR intervention. So managers avoiding discomfort today creates an urgent HR issue later on. And what we find is that avoidance isn't a symptom of severity. It isn't a symptom of a big, real urgent world destroying problem. It's a symptom of avoidance. It's a symptom of things haven't been done in the right way early on. Um, when managers avoid having these conversations, it's usually because they don't feel confident, maybe they don't have the skill, maybe they don't feel safe. They're worried about saying the wrong thing. And what often happens is these managers will think, I don't want to do it wrong. I'd rather not do it wrong because I might end up being the one dragged in front of HR because I've done or said the wrong thing. So it's this real lack of confidence and safety around addressing it themselves. They want to just put all the risk where they think it belongs, which is with the HR teams. So instead they delay, they don't do anything, they escalate too early or too late, or they handle it badly and just make it worse. And what happens is then the people in the organisation, they don't feel heard, anxiety builds up, stories get created, people fill in the gaps of things that they don't know or that they're unsure of. People then start taking sides, and the conflict cycle sort of really starts to build up and show. You start to see gossip, which just further erodes the relationships, psychological safety breaks down, and we see this real, what could have been a relatively small issue turn into something urgent because it's then been avoided. So let's have a look at what actually triggers the urgent calls to HR. Why do they happen in the first place? So you're an HR business partner and your time is constantly being derailed by other people's urgent issues that are coming in. Here are the top 3 reasons why I see that these urgent calls are triggered to up to HR. I hear this over and over and over again. The first one being manager uncertainty, managers not knowing what they should be doing, or not understanding policy, or being a bit confused by policies, or just not having the confidence to really deal with it. As a manager, I don't really know what to do, so I'm just going to call HR and get them to deal with it. The second one is these delayed conversations. So I don't know how to have that conversation. I'm feeling a bit uncomfortable about it. So I'm just not going to have it and hope that the situation goes away. Oops, it hasn't. And actually it's got worse. I better call HR and see if they can deal with it for me. And lastly, HR are the rescuers. So HR will come in, they'll make all the tough decisions. And then I can start to say to my team, well, I tried, but HR have said no. So HR is that safety net. They're seen as either the baddies or the rescuers. So what we're going to do for the rest of this video is have a look at those in a bit more detail, how they come about, and then 3 fixes that you can put in place immediately that will start to combat some of these triggers. So the first thing I see really often as a trigger to urgent HR calls when the issue could have been avoided is uncertainty in people managers. So managers aren't always clear on what's in their remit versus what's HR's responsibility. They can sometimes get a bit muddled in how policies apply. They don't always know what they're allowed to say. They're not quite sure how this applies in real life settings, or they've applied it in one way for one person, but it doesn't fit now for somebody else. And so it comes across as being really unfair and inconsistent. And that just feels really uncomfortable, that uncertainty. So they escalate it to HR to rescue them from the situation. HR will know what to do. I'll just pass it over to them. I'll make it their problem instead. They'd rather HR did the work than get in trouble with HR themselves by doing it wrong. There's a real fear of the risk. So that this real sense of, I don't know what to do, and then everything feels risky. Every decision feels like the wrong one. So they'll escalate it to HR. They might be confused about policies, and so they go, I don't really understand it. I haven't got the time to sit and read through it. So I'm just going to send it to HR because they know it. They know it inside out. They don't have to think about it. They don't have to spend hours reading policies. So I'll just get them to deal with it. And they might transfer that responsibility. So they're passing that risk to HR in order for them to feel safe in that situation and confident that somebody is just going to make the decision for me and I don't have to carry any of that risk. But when managers don't feel confident, everything feels risky, and that risk then gets passed on to HR, and it becomes an urgent issue for you as an HR business partner, or an HR advisor, or whatever your role is within that team. All of a sudden, that's your problem to deal with. Instead, you now hold the risk because the manager's gone, which I don't want to deal with. So manager uncertainty is one of the big triggers that I see for things then becoming an urgent HR issue. The second trigger point that I see for issues escalating to urgent HR issues, but that really could have been dealt with by somebody else, is difficult conversations being avoided. And this isn't uncommon. We see in every workplace and everywhere where there are people having to communicate with people, people avoid difficult conversations. We just feel so uncomfortable with having them. But that delay in something happening and a difficult conversation happening, the longer that goes on, the more that is filled with stories, people making up what they think is going on in that gap. Um, you see gossip, you see anxiety, you see uncertainty, you see people then looking for other jobs, or going off sick because that I don't know what's happening and I don't feel safe in it is what drives people out of organisations. So managers often hope that it would resolve itself, or I don't want to make it worse, so I'm not going to have the conversation. I won't do it because I don't want to be responsible for it being worse. And actually, if I have the conversation, I've implicated myself in the conflict and the drama, and I don't really want to do that. So I'm just going to hope that they resolve it. But that delay, like I say, it really increases that anxiety, that withdrawal, that story building, and ultimately escalation. So by the time HR hears about it, it isn't. I think it's a bit unfair that they've been allowed flexible working on a Wednesday and I can't have it on a Wednesday. It becomes the organisation hates me, the policies are unfair, and it's just this messy, difficult to resolve emotional issue that just has not been dealt with, and it's just got bigger and bigger and messier and messier. And all of a sudden, you now as HR are having to unpick it and reverse the damage, and try and resolve it before somebody resigns or goes off on long-term sick. These issues come to HR, who are then expected to be mediators, arbitrators, negotiators. And that happens once that conflict has turned into like self-destruct mode. So giving issues time to resolve themselves, it doesn't calm the people issue. It inflames them and becomes an urgent HR issue rather than something that could have been dealt with in team much, much earlier on. So the third trigger that I see in issues escalating as urgent to HR, but that could have been dealt with earlier by someone else, is this expectation that HR is the safety net. So HR present themselves as competent and helpful because you are all of those things. And unfortunately, what that can translate to is HR is the dumping ground for everything because they know how to fix everything. They are the rescuers, they are the fixers. And so, why would we bother dealing with it when we can just send it to HR and let them manage all the risk and all the resolution because they know what to do, they know how to deal with it. Managers learn if it feels uncomfortable, HR will fix it. I don't have to sit with that discomfort because I can just send it to HR and they'll tell me what to do. They'll make the decision for me. They become the bad guys because they're the ones telling my staff or my team that they can or can't do these particular things. They'll make all the decisions and I don't have to be accountable for them. Brilliant. The assumption is that HR are the experts. They should handle the difficult stuff. Why would I have to deal with it? There's a whole team of people whose job is to deal with these things. So they become really hands off. Managers just like palm the issues off because they don't want to get it wrong. They don't want to do or say the wrong thing. They don't want to be implicated in it. So they just palm the issues off. They palm the risk off to HR because they're the experts, they deal with it. And this isn't because managers are lazy or incompetent at all. They're busy, but most importantly, the system and the organization and the culture allows it. It rewards it. It says there doesn't have to be accountability if you pass in on to something to HR and not dealing with it yourself. There is no expectation to deal with those things yourself because this is what HR does. And there's this real sense that nobody really understands what HR is for or what they do. They just seem to be the rescuers of all the difficult stuff that nobody else really knows or wants to deal with. And they're either seen as like the baddies that enforce policies that people really hate or feel that they're unfair or treated unfairly, or they're the rescuers that get managers out of sticky situations because, well, HR said that you can't do X. Sorry, not my fault. HR says you can't do that or you can do that. But the result of that is that managers don't build those skills. So they never learn how to deal with it. What they do learn is HR does it. So HR then absorbs all of that workload and the cycle just repeats because what HR consistently rescues, managers never learn to handle themselves. So if these are the three triggers that we're looking at, what can we do about it? Here are three things that HR can do. So if you want to stop urgent HR calls to derailing your day and your working week, there are these three immediate things that you can do as an HR business partner, as an HR advisor, as a head of HR. There are three things that you can do to shift that firefighting response. You can encourage better safety and accountability of staff. I'm going to start that again. So if you are in HR and you want to stop those urgent calls coming in and derailing your day and your working week and your priorities, there are three immediate things that you can do and put in place in the next week or so. So these are encouraging better safety and accountability of staff. So how are they going to be supported to do more before HR needs to step in? And how can that feel safe? How can they feel confident to do that without feeling like they might get in trouble themselves for doing the wrong thing? Setting really clear boundaries and expectations as to what is actually urgent to the business, what is really something that they actually need to that actually needs to be dealt with immediately, and what just feels uncomfortable to that individual. So it feels urgent to them because they don't want to feel uncomfortable anymore. But is it really urgent to the business and what actually needs to happen that day? And allowing HR to stop rescuing and start coaching and empowering to help those issues be dealt with elsewhere. So HR does actually have to only deal with the stuff that truly is urgent, truly is messy, and not things that could have been managed well elsewhere and earlier on. So here are your three things in a bit more detail. So the first fix that I would implement if I was trying to avoid dealing with other people's urgent issues, if I was an HR business partner, is to create a set of filter or triage questions. So HR involvement is seen as escalation. So if I'm an employee and I've had a conflict with a colleague or disagreed with a manager and HR becomes involved, I immediately feel like this is escalated, like this is something really serious and formal now. So coaching managers early builds skills in those managers and helps situations escalating. I've done a lot of work in workplaces and communities where rather than dealing with an issue directly, people have gone straight to management, HR, um, council, police, somebody in perceived authority, and it just invites defensiveness. It just invites, right, I'm in trouble now, so I'm going to have to throw everything I can to justify why I'm not in the wrong and the other person is in the wrong. Let them take the heat instead. And so by allowing those issues to be dealt with directly by the people involved, with no sense that anybody's in trouble or there's any kind of formal um, process being imposed early on, then we can protect those relationships and we can stop things escalating to a point where suddenly they are an urgent, messy HR issue. So what we can do is do this sort of create a before you call HR filter. So a manager comes and says, "Oh, I've got this urgent issue. Can you can you call me?" Um, Use this opportunity to sort of coach managers to have those conversations with your support. So you can help coach them, you can help them practice that conversation that they need to have. You can ask these check-in questions. So, have you spoken to the individual directly? If not, this is how you can have the conversation. Or why haven't you had that conversation? What outcome is it that you're trying to achieve? Do you want this person to resign? Do you want them to come back off long-term sick? Do you want them to um, do you want to bring them back into your team? Do you want clarification on a policy? What is it? What would be a good outcome for you? Because depending on the outcome, you would have a different approach. And um, by giving the manager ownership of that outcome, you're not taking it away, you're not doing that rescuing. And lastly, what have you already tried? What things have led to this point? What has worked? What hasn't worked? What's made things worse? What's made things better? So just having those conversations um, can allow those managers to just feel like I can deal with this. It doesn't have to have a formal HR process. It can just be a chat with somebody in HR to help support me have the conversation. You then can check in later on as well. So, maybe to give them a ring a week later and say, how did it go? Is there anything else you need from us? So over time, those panic escalations will naturally start reducing because managers will feel more confident in having those conversations themselves because you've invested the time in coaching and supporting them and building up that expectation of you try first. If that doesn't work, then we can step in, but we're not the first, we're not the first line of defense here. You are. So allowing that clarity, allowing those conversations with those managers to provide the clarity to help them, that can slow the urgency down because they feel more confident, so it doesn't feel as urgent to them. Therefore, they're not going to sweep you into their panic response. This can feel like a longer process when sometimes I'll just do it myself, feels much quicker and easier. But that upfront investment can save you loads of time in the long run. And those expectations then filter through the organisation as well. So it's not just that one person, but if you're really consistent with this, the organisation expectation starts to shift to we need to do something first. Then if it's still an issue, then we can call HR and and ask for that extra formal support or guidance. So the second fix that I would try and implement if I was trying to avoid dealing with other people's urgent issues as an HR business partner is to redefine what urgent actually is. Urgent is often just uncomfortable. Um, true urgent situations are a legal risk to the business, an immediate risk to somebody's health and safety, a very serious operational breakdown. These things need immediate intervention. You know, a Julie and Bob were gossiping about each other in the kitchen again, and now Julie's saying she's going to resign. Not urgent, but it is important to resolve. It is uncomfortable for the manager and the rest of the team trying to have to deal with it. So everything else that doesn't fit that truly urgent category doesn't mean it's unimportant. But what it does mean is that you don't have to down tools and deal with it in the next 10 minutes. When I'm brought in for conflict resolution work, I often get these emails and they say, "Oh, we need to have a resolution in this, this team's falling apart, none of them talking to each other, we can't have them all in the same room at the same time, and it's causing an absolute business nightmare. We need this resolved in 2 weeks because a formal grievance has been raised, and so we need an outcome within these 2 weeks." When I go and actually have the conversation with people and I say, "Well, how long has this been an issue?" They'll say, "Oh, this has been going on for at least 5 or 6 months." I think, well, it wasn't urgent then. So, there's kind of understanding that what is urgent and what is just uncomfortable, what is a panic, and what actually requires urgent, right now responses. Resolutions to these issues are incredibly important. You don't want to lose people from the organisation. You don't want to have people off sick because they can't face coming into work. So they are super important. But the way that the requests are presented to HR can often lead um, it can often lead us to really get swept up into that urgent panic and feel like we have to do something by the end of the day when sometimes we don't. We can look at what else we've got on, we can reprioritize, and we can say, okay, that's great. What I'm going to do is we'll have a chat on Thursday about it, and we'll kind of decide how to deal with it. And then you can then go into that coaching conversation. You can do the stuff that we talked about from fix one, which is around what have you already done. How can I support you in dealing with it yourself, essentially? And shifting that language from fixer and rescuer, so, oh, give it all to me and I'll deal with it, to collaborator and partner. What have you done already? How can I support you? What do you need from me? What are you expecting me to do? What can I expect from you? Shifting that language and those responses and creating scripts that you can pull out and use with those managers. So things like, what can you do? What have you done already? How long has this been an issue? What do you need HR for? What do you think is HR's role here? So you can have these different scripts, and you can also have the scripts that you can send off to managers and staff and say, here is how you can have that conversation with your team member as well. There are some example scripts on my website, balancefulfillment.com. So you can just download them and use them completely free to help you manage those conversations without you going into that, oh, I don't know how to have the conversation panic. So the third fix that I would implement if I was trying to avoid dealing with other people's urgent issues as an HR business partner is to keep myself out of rescuer mode. So what this means is don't immediately go into that fix it, I'll take it from here response. Short scripts, simple frameworks, confident boosters, they can help empower those people to go off and manage these things better for themselves. So here is a 4-step coaching framework to help build that and remove yourself as the rescuer and to stop being seen as the rescuer and to be seen as a supportive role, maybe a coach. And then later on, if you need it, to be that kind of, enforcer or more formal support role. So firstly, asking those questions. So in the last fix that we talked about, We talked about having scripts of questions around, what have you already tried? How long has this been an issue for you? So inquiring first and trying to shift that manager's mindset into HR will deal with this, to something more like, how can I come away from this conversation feeling more confident to manage this issue myself? Providing scripts, so providing actual resources when managers feel really uncomfortable and uncertain, um, and not confident in having these conversations. Sometimes having these real resources that they can just pull away and go, right, okay, I've got this thing that I can just take and implement and don't really have to think about it, can make them feel more confident, more able to have those difficult conversations themselves and resolve it without any further need for HR implication. Um, Boosting confidence, so really supporting that, you can do this, you know how to do this, you know how to have these conversations, and I can support you. Um, but what you don't want is for it to feel like as soon as HR have any knowledge of the situation, they have to do something really formal and big and scary about it. You want to encourage those, as soon as there's an issue that you're not quite sure what to do, give us a call. We can talk you through it. We can help support you in managing that yourself. And then if that doesn't help, then come back to us and we can start to look at more formal things. You want that to be earlier on, so they've got a chance to deal with it before it has to be something really formal and leads to much bigger outcomes like resignations and sick leave and grievances and those kind of things. And also check-ins as well. So giving the advice, giving these sort of frameworks to managers, and then checking in with them, making them feel like they've got the support and they're not just doing it on their own, that they're not holding all the risk, but they're not passing all the risk off either. So supporting those first conversations instead of absorbing all the issues that they're bringing to you. So every time HR sort of steps back slightly into that coaching role rather than that rescuer role, manager capability and confidence can grow, and the expectations of what HR do and don't do can shift slightly into something that avoids those urgent things becoming urgent in the first place. So what we're looking at here is providing calm systems, clarity for managers, and really just being in that supportive coaching role as much as possible, rather than being the enforcer, the rescuer, the fixer of all things. We're trying to empower other people to be able to manage these situations before they become an urgent HR issue. And you've got no choice then but to step in and do something. So the goal isn't fewer issues in the organisation, it's fewer escalations. It's dealing with those issues in a different way, much earlier on, much more confidently by the people that should be managing them initially. When managers know what is needed, what they need to say, how to respond, when they can use HR as a support rather than a formal process, we can see things just being dealt with much earlier on, and ultimately it saves your workload and it saves your time and allows you to get more done, but it also creates a happier workforce because people feel heard. They don't feel blamed for things. They don't feel unsafe or unlistened to or unvalued in the organisation, because these conversations are happening with your support rather than your enforcement. So problems stay smaller, calmer, much earlier dealt with, and these calm systems, these confident approaches create calm behaviour and happier workplaces. So here are the main takeaways from today's video on how to prevent urgent issues derailing your day as an HR business partner or anybody working in HR. Urgent HR calls are never going to disappear completely, and rightly so, but they can be predictable. Urgent issues don't just appear out of nowhere most of the time. They are almost always a result of an avoided conversation, something escalated, some early intervention that was missed, which means that most of the time they're preventable. They are, they can be stopped and managed by setting boundaries, by stepping into that coaching role, by allowing other people in the organization to feel like they are also able to deal with these issues much earlier on, to stop that escalation cycle before it lands in your teams at 10 o'clock on a Wednesday morning. These small changes in how you respond can really deliver massive workload relief, and you don't have to totally overhaul what you do. You don't have to go on this big culture change piece in your organization. You can just have clearer rules of engagement. And ultimately, you get your time back, you get your working week back, you're able to manage your priorities much, much better. So if you found this useful and you want more, you can join the newsletter. Really practical tools to help you move from firefighting to more strategic stuff. I offer things like conversation scripts, coaching questions, really practical strategies and tips that you can take away and implement. So just head over to the website balancefulfillment.com and you can sign up to the newsletter there. If you found this video helpful, you can support the channel by liking, subscribing and sharing so I can help more HR professionals. See you in the next one.